If you didn't believe that the deep state existed after watching Attorney General Jeff Sessions testify before Congress this week, you should now. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm telling you, there is one. When Russia sells 20% of America's uranium, when the Clinton Foundation gets $145 million, when Bill gets a $500,000 speaking fee from the Kremlin-connected company financing the deal, when Buddy Barack allows Bill to meet with the head of the Russian Nuclear Energy Commission, and the Obama administration's Committee on Foreign Investment approves the sale, tone deaf to the concerns of Republican national security experts. No surprise, 7 of the 9 CFIUS members who approved the sale are connected to the Clinton Foundation. There's a problem, folks, and that problem needs to be investigated. So what's the problem? Why isn't this in front of a grand jury? Why no special counsel? Why is it so difficult for Jeff Sessions to answer a straight question? Why does it appear he's not even clear on whether and what he's recused from? Take a look.
Do you have the authority today, subject to your recusal, to appoint a special counsel to investigate the Uranium One matter?
I believe I do.
Do you have the authority to appoint a special counsel to investigate the Fusion GPS dossier?
I don't believe that I should be talking about and evaluating cases here today. So if I'm not recused, I have the authority, yes, and the duty and the responsibility to make that decision.
And why does it take him months to respond to a congressional oversight committee? His response wouldn't even need to be made public.
But my concern is we sent you a letter 3.5 months ago asking for a second special counsel. And if you're now just considering it, what's it going to take to get a special counsel?
It will take a factual basis that meets the standards of the appointment of a special counsel.
Factual basis? Okay, let's try a different angle. The Clinton campaign and the DNC, which we now know were one and the same, much to Bernie's detriment, and the FBI all pay the author of a fake dossier to muddy up Donald Trump, your president, who appointed you, Mr. Attorney General, which dossier was presumably used by Jim Comey once he dropped it on the president's desk as a basis for a FISA application that could then be used to surveil Americans associated with Trump, which Americans were then illegally unmasked by the 17 intelligence agencies who themselves were suddenly unmasked, thus creating a kangaroo third world justice system where money, power, and the FBI are joined at the hip. And if that isn't worth looking at, then I'm from Mars. And if you did watch that hearing, did you even get a straight answer from the Attorney General? Does he even know the parameters of his own recusal? So how and when are we going to get answers? We already know it takes years for Congress to get responses. Predictions are that the release of Hillary's State Department and Benghazi emails won't be completed until 2020. Now, that's no way to run a government, but it's a real way to hide the truth, or at least cut the guilty a break. It's no wonder the Congress's approval rating is 15%, its disapproval 74%. So what needs to be done? In a few minutes, you'll hear from 2 congressmen determined to get answers. They believe they can successfully and in a timely fashion investigate and get answers. They will subpoena witnesses, bring people in to do depositions, ask for documents, do public hearings. But it must be on a timely schedule. None of this. Ask for a document, wait 3 months, not get the document. 6 months later, consider a subpoena. Wait until the subpoena comes or doesn't come. Basically, running out the scandal clock. The congressional committees need to be supported by leadership, congressional leadership, That means Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, they need to buck up, take responsibility, and get everyone on board. Leadership needs to be in full agreement with committee members, willing to go the distance, willing to go wherever that evidence takes them. And as for the witness who brought Russia's corrupt efforts to pay off whomever they needed to access the United States uranium to the FBI and was then gagged so he couldn't spill the beans on the Clintons, well, he's now going to talk to Congress. There's already an effort to discredit him, which I find rather amusing, given the fact that this businessman was a key witness for the Department of Justice and the FBI, and the left that's attacking him hasn't even heard from him. I don't believe the left can even handle the truth. Now, those same two congressmen are going to tell you that they intend to ask the president to declassify the very application that was used to get the FISA warrant during the campaign. This will tell us whether the dossier created by Hillary and the DNC, and we believe paid for by the FBI as well, is part of the fake FISA application that created the surveillance of Donald Trump and those people connected to the campaign. So to those who say another special counsel serves no purpose, this must stop, I say baloney. I say law and order and truth and justice are the very foundations of this republic. And I am tired of the powerful and the Clintons being above the law that each and every one of us must follow. But Hillary says
this appears to be the politicization of the Justice Department and our justice system. This Uranium One story has been debunked countless times by members of the press, by independent experts. It is nothing but a false charge. This is such an abuse of power, and it goes right at the rule of law.
Pray tell, Hillary, first of all, who's debunked it? The truth? Hillary is from the school of lie, deny, and delay. She and the Obama administration have thwarted Congress at every turn. Investigations are drawn out for so long that America's collective memory fades to the point where no one really cares anymore, which is just what the plan was in the first place. Look, I was a judge. It's real simple. If someone is subpoenaed and there's no response, you hold that person in contempt. You take a look at the facts, you prosecute, and if justified, you put them in jail. We have a system of laws that we, as an ordered society, have agreed to adopt, follow, and enforce. And even though I'm not on the bench anymore, and even though I'm not the DA anymore, I am going to continue to fight to get honest answers. I don't like when people lie, and I don't like when people try to take advantage of others. Now, I'm going to tell you, my audience, I've gotten some major pushback from people, but I'm still a believer. I still believe in truth and justice. The Department of Justice is the last resort, and I'm still a believer. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, hashtag Judge Jeanine.
Now we're going to talk to an expert about what all of this means. Joining me now, former CIA officer and candidate for the United States Senate, Sam Faddis. Sam, thanks for coming on the show.
Great to be here, Liz. Thank you very much.
All right, Sam, this is quite a story, and I want to start just with half of my question. The first half of this is if the Obama administration knew about the corruption, these bribery plots, extortion coming from the Russians, and they did, both the FBI under President Obama and the Department of Justice knew, as we learned from these documents that were recently released. How could they and why would they continue to approve the sale of such a large chunk, 20% of the uranium in the United States?
Well, I mean, the short answer is there's no good reason, right? I mean, this stinks of corruption and collusion, and if you're an American of whatever political persuasion and you care about the integrity of this country, you ought to be terrified at the implications, because we sold critical assets and ignored the fact that the Russians were involved in all sorts of nefarious activities. And then the FBI, in effect, sat on this for years, all of this, of course, occurring against the backdrop of the fact that there are these continuing allegations, unsubstantiated, that the problem here is somehow Trump and the Russians. And in fact, there are millions and millions of dollars from Russia connected directly to the Clintons.
Right. And I mean, there's so many points about this story that need to be made. I hardly know where to start. But first of all, I want to make one thing very clear. The FBI knew, they were fully aware, and in these documents there is proof that they were aware that high-level Russian officials had a plot to infiltrate U.S. nuclear entities. They were fully aware. This was a coordinated effort by the Russians to get access to our nuclear assets, to use the word that you use. Second of all, so this is not naivete on the part of the Obama administration that it might be some other actor that was simply associated with the Russians. This was planned and plotted by the Russian government. Second of all, that brings us to, the part, that timeline that you're talking about. From 2009, that's when the FBI first learned about this. 2010, that's when the Department of Justice first learned about this. The investigation continued for the next 4 years before we found out anything about it. I mean, we're only recently learning about it, but for the next 4 years, this investigation was underway, and during that time was when the Obama administration's State Department approved the sale of that uranium. Why would they keep this secret for so long from the public? Why wouldn't they even tell Congress?
Again, there's no good reason. I mean, typically the FBI, with an investigation like this, there's going to be a race for them to call a press conference and take credit for it, and you're going to read it on the front page of every newspaper. Well, obviously, there was a presidential election underway. I mean, we went through an election, and Hillary Clinton was a candidate, and she's directly tied to all of this. Back to one of the first points you threw out, it's not just that the FBI had evidence, because they obviously did, I mean, concrete evidence. They had confidential informers. They pursued and obtained indictments, and they put people in prison as a result of this investigation. This is all hard fact that was then, as far as I can tell, covered up. And one other point worth mentioning, the guy running the FBI during this whole time frame is the same guy who now is supposedly conducting an impartial investigation of Donald Trump and his alleged ties to Russia.
Right, Robert Mueller. He was head of the FBI during this time. It's almost chilling to think about that. All right, so the other aspect of this, and perhaps this is where the politics really come to the surface here. President Obama was president at the time, Democrat. His Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton, as we know. During this time, there are eyewitness accounts and documentation, both, all you need for proof here, that say that these same Russian nuclear officials who plotted and planned with the Russian government to infiltrate U.S. nuclear entities, they sent millions and millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, vast sums. I've seen numbers as high as something like $145 million. They handed $500,000 directly to Bill Clinton under the pretext that he gave a single speech in Moscow. Back to this comparison to these specious allegations against Donald Trump, which have no substance and nobody can even define what they are. This is concrete evidence, stacks of evidence of conspiracy, criminal activity, buying influence, penetrating U.S. strategic resources, effectively ignored and shoved under the rug for years.
Right, and the crime here, and this is even taking the Clintons out of it. Everyone who watches the show knows my opinion on whether or not Hillary Clinton is a criminal, and I believe that she did break the law and should have been held accountable for it. But even taking her out of this picture for one moment, this was a crime committed by these Russian officials. We should never have sold, that should never have been approved, that sale of that uranium, because doing this type of thing, and we knew about it, the FBI knew about it in 2009, providing kickbacks, bribes to this nuclear trucking company, that violates the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That is a crime, and they should have been prosecuted, and they shouldn't have been allowed to conduct business in our country after committing that crime.
Well, 100%. As you've noted, and we've had this conversation before, because of the fact that the uranium is a strategic asset, this sale, leaving aside the trucking firm, the sale of the uranium ore, 20% of our reserves, actually had to be formally approved by this body, this federal commission, on which Hillary Clinton sat, as well as the Attorney General Holder sat. They had to formally chop off on this, take an affirmative action to allow this to go forward. So against the backdrop of everything you're talking about, which is this documented, long-running investigation of corruption and kickbacks and bribes, that sale was allowed to go forward.
Right, and it also debunks
really of corruption.
Right, it also debunks Hillary Clinton's defense. She's defended the money that the Clinton Foundation has accepted from Russia or Russian-linked entities before by saying, no, it wasn't pay to play, it wasn't paying off for favors for her approving this deal. She said because, and her excuse was because she said Russia had nothing, the Russian government had nothing to do with the purchase or the sale of the stores of the uranium, the 20% of uranium. Well, this story debunks that. We see that it's all intricately tied together, and make no mistake, Hillary Clinton knew that all along. Sam, thanks for coming on the show and breaking it down. I appreciate